She's just useless now. That's what my son whispered to his wife as he sold my house out from under me while I was still alive, trapped in a wheelchair, listening from the hallway like I was already dead. The same son I raised alone, the same boy I gave everything to. But what broke me wasn't just the word useless, it was what came next. He called my belongings liquidatable assets, my garden, my piano, my life. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I just smiled because he had no idea I'd already rewritten the will, and not a single penny was going to him. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Elena Winters, and I'm 70 years old. After teaching music for 42 years, I now spend my days in room 214 of Oakwood Care Center, my wheelchair parked by a window that barely opens. My son Travis, a senior vice president at Meridian Bank, used to visit every Sunday with the dedication of a timekeeper. Now his expensive cologne merely ghosts through monthly, leaving nothing but empty promises and a familiar ache. The staff shuffle me past walls that haven't seen fresh paint in years, their pity wrapped in professional smiles. In my nightstand drawer, beneath folded handkerchiefs, I keep a silver-framed photo of Travis at 8, his gap-toothed grin still pure. What he doesn't know is that I've kept something else too, something worth far more than memories. My fingers trace the edge of my old will, and my lips curve into a quiet smile. But let me start from the beginning. The days here blend together like watercolors left in the rain. Breakfast arrives at 7, always lukewarm, always beige. The staff rotate through their shifts, each wearing different colored scrubs but the same tired smile. Some remember my name, others just call me dear. You'd be surprised how quickly you can get used to being invisible. Remember how I mentioned Travis's promise? It was right after my stroke, when the doctors said I wouldn't walk again. He stood there in his tailored suit, squeezing my hand like he meant it. "Mom, you'll never want for anything. I'll make sure of it." The memory of those words sits in my stomach like spoiled milk now. This morning's oatmeal was especially bland when Maria, the morning nurse, popped her head in. "Mrs. Winters, your son's here." My heart did that foolish little jump it always does, even though I should know better by now. Travis swept in wearing his usual armor designer suit, carefully styled hair, that watch that probably cost more than my old car. You know the type? All polish, no warmth. His wife Jennifer lingered by the door, tapping away at her phone like it might explode if she stopped. "Hi, Mom," he said, already pulling out his own phone. "How are you holding up?" I watched him scroll through emails while I talked about my physical therapy progress. He nodded at all the right moments, but his eyes never left that screen. 20 minutes of this performance, and he was already standing, straightening his jacket. "Sorry, Mom, got a meeting across town. We'll stay longer next time, okay?" That's when it happened. They thought I couldn't hear them in the hallway. People always assume the elderly are deaf. Travis leaned close to Jennifer, his voice low but clear as crystal. "She's just useless now. Have you ever felt your whole world tilt sideways? Like someone just pulled the ground out from under you?" My hands gripped my wheelchair arms so tight my knuckles went white. The shame burned hot in my chest. Then something else, something harder and colder settled in behind it. I wheeled myself back to my room, probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. My roommate Lorraine was there, curled up in her armchair with one of her mystery novels. That woman's got the sharpest eyes I've ever seen, and they locked onto me like heat-seeking missiles. Well, she said, marking her page. "You look like someone just peed in your cornflakes. Spill it." Lorraine used to be a social worker, 40 years of seeing the worst in people while somehow keeping her sense of humor. She's got this crown of silver curls and usually wears sweaters 3 sizes too big. But don't let that fool you. She's sharp as a tack and twice as pointed. My voice cracked, and suddenly the tears I'd been holding back spilled over. I heard Travis in the hall. He called me useless. Lorraine's face went still, the way it does when she's truly angry. Then she let out a low whistle. That precious little suit, wearing snake. She leaned forward, her eyes fierce. Listen to me, honey. Don't die small. Die unforgettable. That night, after the nurses finished their rounds, I pulled out Travis's photo from my nightstand. My hands shook as I held it under the dim bedside lamp. There he was, 8 years old, missing his front teeth, wearing that baseball cap I'd saved up 3 months to buy him. I used to look at this picture and feel love surge through me like a tide. Now I felt something else entirely. You see, I took this photo from his house the day he moved me here. He never even noticed it was gone. Just like he never noticed how much of myself I'd given up for him. How many dreams I'd set aside to make sure he had everything. Just like he never noticed when he started treating me like a task instead of a mother. My fingers traced his young, innocent face. Useless, I whispered, the word bitter on my tongue like medicine. The silver frame caught the afternoon light as I eased it off Travis's mantle that day 5 months ago. Remember how I mentioned taking it? Well, let me tell you exactly how that went down. I was sitting in my wheelchair while Travis and Jennifer bustled around packing up what they'd decided I needed for the facility. They were like busy bees, those two, buzzing past me as if I was just another piece of furniture to be moved. That photo had always been there, right next to their wedding picture and Travis's finance awards. He used to proudly tell guests how young he was when he hit his first home run. But that day, he didn't even glance at it. So, when Jennifer wheeled me past the fireplace one last time, I reached out and slipped it into my lap blanket. Quick and quiet, like I used to sneak cookies into Travis's lunchbox when he was small. Now, in my dim room at Oakwood Care, I hold that frame like it's made of pure gold instead of tarnished silver. Funny how something can be both a comfort and a curse, isn't it? The glass is slightly smudged from my fingerprints. I touch it so often these days, as if I could reach through and shake some sense into that innocent little boy who used to adore his mama. The next morning, Lorraine joined me at breakfast. The oatmeal was its usual self-bland and mushy, like everything else they serve here. She pulled up her chair, took one look at my face, and set down her spoon. "You've got that look," she said, adjusting her oversized purple sweater. "The one that says you're either planning a jailbreak or plotting revenge." I stirred my oatmeal, watching the little whirlpool form in the middle. Maybe both. She leaned in close, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Well then, let me ask you something important. Do you want justice or poetry?" I looked up, meeting her keen eyes. "Both." "Now that's what I like to hear." She pulled out a tablet from her massive sweater pocket, one of those donated ones the facility gives out for recreational therapy. But Lorraine, bless her heart, had already figured out how to use it better than half the staff. "Let me show you something," she said, her fingers tapping away. "Back when I was still working, there was this place out in rural Route 7, Sweet Haven Children's Home. They specifically take in disabled foster kids, the ones other places turn away." Her voice softened. "They do amazing work, but they're always struggling for funding." Something stirred in my chest, a warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Tell me more." For the next hour, we huddled over that tablet, reading about Sweet Haven, looking at pictures of children in wheelchairs, playing in a garden that needed weeding, sleeping in rooms that needed painting. My mind started spinning with possibilities. "You know," Lorraine said carefully, "a place like that could do incredible things with the right resources." Before I could respond, Ms. Patterson, the facility administrator, appeared at our table. Her face had that pinched look it gets when she's delivering bad news. "Mrs. Winters," she said, clutching her clipboard, "I need to speak with you about your house." My stomach dropped. "What about my house?" "Your son Travis has filed paperwork to begin liquidation procedures." He says it's to help cover your care costs. The room tilted slightly. My house, my garden with the rose bushes I'd planted with my late husband, the piano room where I'd taught hundreds of students, the kitchen where I'd raised my son, all being sold out from under me while I sat here eating lukewarm oatmeal. He can't, I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew he could. He had power of attorney. I'd given it to him myself, back when I trusted him with everything. Lorraine's hand found mine under the table and squeezed hard. "When did this request come in?" she asked, her voice sharp with authority, that social worker tone that demands answers. "This morning," Ms. Patterson replied, "the paperwork's still being processed." I stared at the tablet screen, still showing Sweet Haven's webpage. Those children's faces looked back at me, and suddenly, the path forward became crystal clear. I wish I could tell you my hands weren't shaking when I made that call, but they were. Lorraine had slipped me her old Rolodex skin. You believe she still kept one of those? And there, under W for Wills, was Darlene Matthews' number. She helped me set up my own revenge fund. Lorraine had whispered with a wink, "Trust me, she gets it." The phone rang 3 times before a warm, steady voice answered. I explained my situation, trying to keep my voice from wavering. When I mentioned Lorraine's name, there was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Ah, another one of Lorraine's special cases. I can be there Thursday afternoon." True to her word, Darlene arrived precisely at 2. She wasn't what I expected, no power suit or flashy briefcase. Just a sensible bob haircut, minimal jewelry, and a leather portfolio that had seen better days. But her eyes, sharp as tacks and kind around the edges. "Mrs. Winters," she said, pulling up a chair beside my wheelchair, "Lorraine tells me you'd like to make some changes to your estate planning." I nodded, grateful she hadn't used that patronizing tone so many people adopt around wheelchairs. "My current will leaves everything to my son," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I'd like to change that. Remember how your grandmother used to say sometimes the quietest people have the strongest spirits?" That was Darlene. She listened without a single interruption as I laid out my plant house, my investment portfolio, modest but carefully tended, even my mother's pearls. All of it redirected to Sweet Haven Children's Home. I wanted ironclad, I told her. The kind of document that makes expensive lawyers shake their heads and say, "Don't even try it." Darlene's lips curved into a small smile as she pulled out form after form. "We'll need to document your mental competency," she said, making notes, "and establish a clear pattern of rational decision-making. Your medical records will help. The stroke affected your mobility, not your mind." For the next 2 hours, we worked through every detail. My signature grew steadier with each page, as if my hand knew this was right. The afternoon light slanted through the window, catching the silver frame of Travis's photo on my nightstand. I turned it face down before Darlene arrived. "Mrs. Winters," Darlene said finally, looking up from her papers, "I need to warn you, if your son challenges this, it could get messy. Are you prepared for that?" I met her gaze steadily. "It's already messy, I just want it done right." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then we'll do it right. I'll file these first thing tomorrow morning. Everything will be official by close of business." After she left, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The weight of Travis's betrayal was still there, but lighter somehow, balanced by the knowledge that something good would come from all this pain. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jenny, one of the evening nurses, poked her head in. "Mrs. Winters? I have a message from your son." My stomach clenched. "Yes?" "He called to schedule an emergency visit for tomorrow morning. Said it's urgent." Jenny shifted uncomfortably. He seemed upset. The peace I'd felt moments ago evaporated like morning dew. My hands found the arms of my wheelchair, gripping tight enough to whiten my knuckles. Tomorrow. He was coming tomorrow. How had he found out so quickly? Unless someone at the facility had called him? The walls suddenly felt closer, the air thinner. I thought of Darlene's papers, barely dry from signing. At least those were safely filed away, beyond his reach. But Travis himself? He would be here in less than 12 hours, and I knew my son when his money was threatened. He didn't come bearing flowers and apologies. The next morning dawned gray and sullen, matching my mood. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with imagined confrontations. Around 9, I heard him before I saw him, quick, angry footsteps echoing down the hallway like thunderclaps. Travis burst through my door without knocking, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, tie askew. Gone was the polished banker who'd been too busy to visit his mother. In his place stood someone I barely recognized, face flushed with rage. "What did you do?" he demanded, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "Who did you hire?" I kept my hands folded in my lap, steady despite my racing heart. "Remember when your kids would throw tantrums, and the best response was calm silence?" Same principle. "Answer me," his voice cracked. "The bank called, said they got some notification about your assets being transferred. What are you playing at?" I lifted my chin slightly. "I'm not playing at anything, Travis. This is ridiculous." He spat, running his hands through his hair. "You can't make decisions like this. You're not." He caught himself, but I heard the unspoken word, competent. "Not what, Travis?" My voice was quiet but clear. "Not useful anymore?" He flinched, and I knew he remembered his whispered words from before. "Good. Mother." He tried a different approach, forcing his voice into that condescending tone he used with difficult clients. "You're not thinking clearly. This facility, your career, all costs money. Money I've been managing for you." "Managing?" I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call trying to sell my house while I'm still alive?" That stopped him cold. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, guilt, anger, before settling on something harder. "After everything I've done for you," he hissed. "This is how you repay me?" The words hit like slaps. Everything he'd done for me? Like dumping me in this facility and disappearing? Like treating me like an inconvenient expense on his balance sheet? But I didn't say any of that. I just watched him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and stayed silent. "Fine," he snapped, straightening his tie. "Have it your way, but don't think this is over." He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the photo frame on my nightstand. I sat there shaking for a long time, until Lorraine wheeled herself in with an apple and a concerned expression. "I heard Hurricane Travis from down the hall," she said, pulling out a small knife to cut the fruit. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted, watching her steady hands slice perfect wedges. Maybe I should just let it go. He's still my son." Lorraine's knife came down with extra force. "You didn't come this far to shrink now," she said firmly, pointing the blade at me for emphasis. "That man who just left, that's not your son anymore. That's a banker protecting his inheritance." I nodded, but fear still prickled along my spine like ice water. What if he was right? What if I was being foolish, burning this bridge? Later that evening, after Lorraine had gone to sleep, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a soft knock. The door opened just enough for Celia, one of the younger nurses, to slip inside. She glanced nervously over her shoulder before approaching my wheelchair. "Mrs. Winters," she whispered, pulling something from her pocket. I recorded that. Your son's visit." She held out her phone. "I know we're not supposed to, but the way he's been treating you." She swallowed hard. "I thought you might need it, as proof of who he really is." I stared at the phone, then at Celia's determined young face. This quiet girl who'd always brought me extra blankets when I was cold. who hummed while changing my sheets she'd seen. She'd understood, and she'd acted. In case you need it, she repeated softly, showing me how to access the audio file before slipping back out as silently as she'd come. The next morning, Celia returned during her early shift. She pulled a chair close to my bed while Lorraine wheeled herself over, both of us leaning in as Celia pressed play. Travis's voice filled the small space between us. "Who do you think you are?" The recording was crystal clear, every bitter word, every threat. "I've managed everything. Everything. And this is the thanks I get?" My hands trembled in my lap as I listened to my Sanmi little boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets rage about his rightful inheritance, about my incompetence, about the house he'd already arranged to sell. "It's a done deal," his recorded voice sneered. "The realtor's already lined up. What are you going to do about it, stuck in that chair?" Lorraine's face grew darker with each passing second. When Travis's final threat echoed out, "You'll regret this, Mother," she reached over and squeezed my hand. "This isn't just ammo," she said, her eyes gleaming. "It's insurance. No judge in their right mind would side with him after hearing this." I couldn't speak for a moment. The tears came hot and fast, relief and heartbreak tangled up together like old yarn. You'd think after everything, I'd be out of tears for Travis. But mothers' hearts are funny that way. "Can you?" I had to clear my throat. "Can you send this to my lawyer?" Celia nodded, already pulling up her email. "What's her address?" I recited Darlene's information, watching as Celia's fingers flew over her phone screen. When she hit send, something settled in my chest like closing a door you've been dreading but knowing it's the right thing to do. "Thank you," I whispered, and Celia just smiled, patting my shoulder before slipping away to finish her rounds. 2 days later, Darlene called. "I've reviewed the recording," she said, her voice warm with satisfaction. "This makes your will practically challenge-proof. He'd be a fool to contest it now." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Bone-deep tired, in a way that had nothing to do with my wheelchair or my morning medications. Remember that feeling when you've graded your last paper of the term, and suddenly all the energy just drains away? It was like that, but deeper. "Lorraine," I said that evening, watching the sunset paint our window golden, "I need to ask you something." She looked up from her magazine. "Shoot. Will you help me make a video?" "I want to." I gestured vaguely at myself, at the room, at everything. "I want to explain, in my own words, just in case." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's do it by your little garden," she said, wheeling over to the windowsill where we'd planted herbs and African violets last month. The leaves were thick and green now, reaching toward the light. We spent an hour getting everything just right, the angle, the lighting, my hair. Lorraine propped her tablet against a stack of books and pressed record. I spoke directly to the camera, telling my story simply and clearly. I talked about Travis as a boy, about teaching music, about my hopes for the children's home. When I finished, Lorraine watched the playback, nodding in approval. "Perfect," she said. "Clear as a bell and twice as strong." I stared at the violets, their purple faces turned toward the setting sun. "I'm not scared to die anymore," I whispered, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I'm scared he'll erase me, turn me into whatever story makes him look best." Lorraine wheeled closer, adjusting my shawl with gentle hands. "Not anymore," she said firmly. "You've made sure of that." I touched one of the violet's soft leaves, remembering how Travis used to help me in my garden, his small hands covered in dirt and joy. The memory didn't hurt as much as it used to, maybe because I'd finally found a way to make something beautiful grow from all this pain. 6 weeks. That's how long it took for my body to finally catch up with what my heart already knew. The changes came softly at first, a deeper tiredness in the afternoons, food that just didn't interest me anymore, dreams that felt more real than my waking hours. Lorraine noticed before anyone else. "You're fading," she said one morning, watching me push away another untouched breakfast tray. I didn't deny it. When Dr. Marshall suggested hospitalization, I shook my head. "I'd rather stay here," I told him. "I have things to finish." And I did. Every morning, while my hands were still steady enough to hold a pen, I wrote letters to the children's home. I described each room in my house, sharing my vision for how they could use the spaces. The sunroom would make a perfect study area, I told them. The garden could teach the children about nurturing living things. My old piano will. Music has a way of healing broken spirits, doesn't it? "Are you sure you don't want me to call Travis?" Celia asked one afternoon, checking my vital signs with gentle efficiency. I smiled, thinking of the silver-framed photo still hidden in my nightstand. "He made his choice," I said. "Now I've made mine." Speaking of choices, I had one last request for Celia. "Would you plant forget-me-nots in the garden outside? Blue ones?" I asked her. "They're hardy little things. They'll come back year after year." She promised she would, and I saw her out there the next day, working the soil with careful hands. You know what they say about nurses, they understand both endings and beginnings better than most. Lorraine kept me company through those final days, reading me news articles, sharing gossip, never treating me like I was disappearing. "You're the most alive, dying person I've ever met," she declared one evening. That made me laugh, which turned into coughing, but it was worth it. I held on long enough to see Celia's forget-me-nots start to bloom, tiny blue stars against the dark earth. Then, one quiet Tuesday morning, I simply let go. Darlene didn't waste any time. She'd promised me that, and she was a woman of her word. The summons went out to Travis that same afternoon, certified mail, signature required, professional, proper, just the way he liked things. I can picture him now, striding into her office in one of his tailored suits, that confident smile he wears like armor. He probably assumed this was just a formality. After all, he was my only child, my sole heir. Who else would I leave everything to? But instead of a check, Darlene handed him a thick manila envelope. Inside, a copy of my new will, crystal clear in its intentions. Every asset, every account, every piece of jewelry, all of it designated for the children's home. Legal, binding, witnessed. Next came the audio file, his own voice betraying him. Those terrible words he'd spat at me preserved forever. And finally, a flash drive labeled simply "her words." That's where my part of the story ends, really. The rest belongs to Travis. Know his shock, his rage, his slow realization that everything he'd counted on had slipped through his fingers like water. You might think this was cruel of me. Maybe it was. But sometimes love needs teeth to teach its hardest lessons. And while I couldn't make Travis remember how to be my son, I could make sure he never forgot who his mother was. Besides, I'd left him something after, although he wouldn't understand its value yet. That silver-framed photo from his childhood was still in my nightstand drawer, waiting to be discovered. In it, a little boy grins up at his mother, his hands full of freshly picked flowers, his heart still pure and full of light. Some might call that poetry, some might call it justice. I call it both. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but Lorraine's friend at the law office told her exactly how it went down. Travis exploded out of Darlene's office like a man possessed, knocking over a potted plant in his rush to escape. The ceramic shattered across the floor. Rather fitting, don't you think? He was on his phone before he even reached his car, barking at his own lawyer to fix this mess. Poor man probably didn't even have time for lunch that day, what with Travis demanding immediate action. But sometimes the simplest truths are the hardest to swallow. There was nothing to fix. Darlene had done her job too well. Every I dotted, every T crossed, with witnesses and notaries and medical evaluations proving I was of sound mind. The recording was authentic, undoctored. My video statement was clear and compelling. Travis's lawyer tried to argue undue influence, but that fell apart the moment they saw my filmed testimony. You should have seen the video. Well, maybe you did, since it made quite a splash when it went public. There I sat in my wheelchair, positioned just so the morning light caught my face. Behind me, you could see Lorraine's windowsill garden, bright with marigolds and mint. I looked directly into the camera and spoke from my heart. I raised my son alone after his father died, I began. Worked 2 jobs sometimes, teaching piano lessons late into the evening so Travis could have everything he needed. I don't regret a minute of it, but somewhere along the way, that bright, loving boy turned into a man who sees people as either assets or burdens. I paused there, touching the silver locket at my throat, the one with Travis's baby picture inside. When I had my stroke, I learned which category I fell into. My son. Here, my voice caught slightly. My son didn't just abandon me to strangers. He tried to sell my home while I was still alive, called me useless, treated me like an inconvenience to be managed. The next part came out stronger. So I'm making a choice. My estate will go to children who understand what it means to be considered disposable. My home will become their sanctuary. My garden will give them peace. And maybe, just maybe, they'll learn that their worth isn't measured by other people's expectations. Darlene released that video to the children's home first, then to local media outlets exactly as I'd instructed. The Mercury Herald ran it with the headline, "Local Mother's Final Act of Love Benefits Forgotten Children." The story spread like wildfire through our small community. People who'd known me from my teaching days shared their memories. Former students spoke about the difference I'd made in their lives. But karma wasn't finished with Travis yet. Someone and I still don't know who, though I have my suspicions about that kind nurse. Celia sent the recording of Travis's outburst to the ethics board at his bank. You know how these financial institutions are about their reputation. They take a dim view of executives who verbally abuse elderly relatives and try to seize their assets. Travis was in a board meeting when security arrived to escort him to human resources. They had questions about his personal conduct and its reflection on the bank's values. The recording played in that sterile conference room, every word echoing off the walls. His threats, his entitlement, his casual cruelty. They put him on immediate administrative leave, unpaid, pending review. His colleagues whispered behind his back. Clients started requesting different account managers. Even his country club membership came under scrutiny. Travis tried to spin it, of course, called it a family matter, a misunderstanding, a manipulation by outside forces. But you can't unring a bell, and you can't unhear the way a son speaks to his mother when he thinks nobody's listening. By week's end, his carefully constructed world was crumbling. His reputation, the thing he'd valued above everything else, above even basic human decency, lay in tatters. The same community that had once admired his success now saw him for what he was. And somewhere in that fancy lake house of his, a silver-framed photo was missing from his shelf. He probably hadn't even noticed its absence yet. But he would. Oh yes, he would. A week after Travis's world started falling apart, mine started coming together, though I wasn't there to see it. Lorraine told me later how it all unfolded, and honestly I couldn't have scripted it better if I'd tried. The suspension hit Travis hard. His bank didn't just put him on leave, they froze him out completely. No access to his office, no contact with clients, not even his company email. His wife Caroline, always so proud of their social standing, stopped appearing with him at their usual spots. Guess she didn't fancy being whispered about at her precious charity luncheons. You know how small towns are. Word travels faster than summer lightning. The local blog, River City Whispers, got hold of my video and, well, they had themselves a field day. They ran clips side by side. me talking about teaching piano to support my son, then that audio of Travis snarling about what a burden I'd become. The contrast hit people right in the heart. The comments section filled up with folks sharing stories about my former students remembering how I'd let them practice on my piano when their families couldn't afford lessons. Neighbors recalling how I'd kept my garden open for anyone needing a quiet moment. But the real magic? That happened at 247 Maple Street, me old house, now transformed into something beautiful. The moving truck pulled up on a Wednesday morning. I'd been specific in my instructions about what should go where. My antique Steinway, the one I'd saved 3 years to buy, got pride of place in what used to be my living room. The movers treated it like crystal, which made me smile from wherever I was watching. That piano had seen thousands of small hands learn their first scales. Now it would hear new music, different dreams. Then came my garden bench. 2 workers carried it carefully through the blooming dogwood trees I'd planted decades ago. They placed it exactly where I'd specified, under the largest tree, facing east to catch the morning sun. It looked right at home there, like it had been waiting all these years for this moment. You should have seen those children. They came spilling out of the house, 6 of them at first, more arriving each day. They approached the bench almost reverently, running their fingers along the weathered wood. Then one little girl, maybe 7 or 8, climbed up and declared, "I'm sitting in Grandma's seat." Just like that, the spell broke. They all wanted turns after that, giggling and making up stories about the mysterious grandmother who'd given them this gift. The staff at Hope Haven Children's Home, that's what they renamed my house. They understood what I was trying to do. They mounted a small brass plaque on the bench's backrest. "A life planted in love," it read. Simple words, but they caught the light just right when the sun rose. Back in town, Travis's reputation kept withering. The country club suddenly found irregularities with his membership. His golf buddies stopped returning his calls. Caroline took an extended trip to her sister's in Phoenix. The gossip blog updated daily with new revelations about his character seams. Once people started talking, they couldn't stop. But at Hope Haven, life bloomed. The children turned my vegetable garden into their science project. They practiced on my piano, their uncertain notes floating through open windows. They left painted rocks along the garden path and hung wind chimes from the dogwood branches. One afternoon, a little boy in a wheelchair rolled himself out to the bench. He sat there for hours, watching butterflies dance through the flowers I'd planted. When the staff asked if he was okay, he just smiled and said, "It feels like somebody understands." That's when I really knew I'd made the right choice. Travis might have seen me as useless, but these children, they saw the value in everything, in a well-worn garden bench, in an old piano's song, in the simple act of being seen and cherished. The plaque caught the sunlight every morning, sending little flashes of brightness across the lawn. A life planted in love. Not a bad legacy if you ask me. Not bad at all. The Channel 5 news van pulled up to Hope Haven on a crisp autumn morning. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but Lorraine told me later how it all played out. The reporter, Sarah Chen, had caught wind of my story through that viral blog post and decided it deserved more than just online chatter. She interviewed everyone, the staff, the children, even tracked down some of my old piano students. But the heart of her piece, that was my video, the one I'd filmed in front of those window flowers with Lorraine coaching me through my nerves. A mother's worth isn't measured in steps, I'd said in that final recording, my voice steady despite everything. It's measured in strength, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is redirect love where it's needed most. They aired the segment during prime time, calling it Strength in Stillness. Quite poetic for local news, wouldn't you say? They showed clips of the children playing in my garden, practicing on my old Steinway, and gathering around that weathered bench like it was their own special throne. Travis watched it all from his Lakeview condo, the same one he'd been so proud to show off at parties. Only now the parties had stopped. His phone had gone quiet. The bank's ethics board hadn't just suspended him, they'd let him go completely. Conduct unbecoming, they called it. Seems they took a dim view of executives who threatened elderly mothers on recorded audio. Caroline had moved out 2 weeks earlier, taking her designer wardrobe and her country club membership with her. She'd left him a note. I married up, not down. Ouch. But then, she'd always been practical that way. The reporter didn't shy away from Travis's side of the story. She included that damning audio clip, his voice sharp with contempt, calling me useless, threatening to contest my will. They balanced it against footage of the children's home, now bright with fresh paint and new life. The contrast said everything that needed saying. Darlene watched the segment from her office. The next morning, she received a thick envelope from Hope Haven. Inside was a thank you letter, photographs, and a crayon drawing of my garden bench surrounded by stick figures. The kids had signed their names around the edges in wobbly letters. But the photo that really got to her, it showed all 12 children gathered around my old bench, some standing, some sitting, one boy in his wheelchair positioned proudly at the center. They were beaming at the camera, surrounded by blooming forget-me-nots, Celia's handiwork, that she'd kept her promise about planting them. Darlene made copies. She sent one to Lorraine, who apparently cried into her morning coffee when she opened it. Another went to Celia, who pinned it to the nurse's station bulletin board. Sometimes, she told her colleagues, justice wears a garden hat. The reporter ended her piece with a shot of my bench at sunset, that brass plaque catching the last light of day. Then she stepped into frame, her expression gentle. In her final message, recorded just weeks before her passing, she said something that resonates far beyond these garden walls. The screen cut to my face, calm despite my wheelchair, those window flowers nodding behind me. We're all temporary gardeners, I'd said, managing a small smile. The real question is, what will bloom after we're gone? The camera panned back to the children playing tag around my dogwood trees, their laughter carrying across the lawn. A perfect ending shot, don't you think? Travis switched off his TV that night in his empty condo, surrounded by the hollow echo of his choices. Meanwhile, across town, a group of children fell asleep in rooms painted in colors I'd chosen, under quilts I'd collected, their dreams protected by walls that had once held mine. Sometimes justice arrives quietly, like morning dew. Sometimes it blooms in unexpected gardens, and sometimes sits in a weathered bench under a dogwood tree, waiting for new stories to unfold. I'd left Lorraine a surprise in my papers, a letter and taxi funds for Hope Haven visits. 3 weeks after the news segment, she arrived in a cab, silver curls gleaming in the morning light. It's the lady from the video, the children called, rushing to help her. At 75, Lorraine still had that special way with kidshire social work showing through. Look at this place, she said, admiring the fresh paint and playground. My rose bushes flourished, pink blooms swaying. I used to direct their pruning, even from my wheelchair. Grace, the director, welcomed her warmly. Inside, children's art decorated the walls, and my Steinway showed signs of regular use. Lorraine patted her familiar oversized purse. I brought something special, she told Grace. And that news crew's back. The same reporter was setting up by my garden bench, ready for another chapter. Children gathered as Lorraine sat in my chair under the dogwood's shower of petals. She pulled out my sealed envelope. Your grandma, she began, wrote this for times like this. Everyone listened intently, even the trying to be disinterested teens. My dear ones, she read clearly. If you're hearing this, I'm gone, but my garden is where it belongs with you. Let me tell you about gardens. I'd written about seeds finding unlikely homes and flowers pushing through hard soil. The message reached them all, especially a bright-eyed girl in her wheelchair. Lorraine's voice softened at the end. Remember, a mother's worth isn't measured by steps but by strength. The children cheered, knowing the words by heart. Later, over lemonade and cookies, Lorraine shared stories of our roommate days, while the camera captured this garden of new hopes growing exactly as I'd planned. I never expected my quiet revenge to make national headlines, but after Lorraine read my letter, my story went viral. Good Morning America ran The Silent Revolution with dramatic music and my video statement. They loved it, this wheelchair-bound old lady who'd turned betrayal into beauty. They played the clip of me in the garden, sunlight on my silver hair as I explained changing my will. Sometimes the greatest acts of love come from knowing when to let go. Their editing, cutting between my smile and Travis's outburst, told quite a story. Travis's world crumbled. His bank issued a statement. The personal conduct described does not align with our values. His golf buddies vanished, charity boards dropped him, and one viral article labeled him the face of filial failure. Then his wife, who'd watched him dump me in that facility, filed for separation. The leaked documents cited irreconcilable values and my treatment as evidence. At the care facility, Lorraine and Celia made watching the coverage their ritual. That morning, they caught a breakfast show segment. "Look," Lorraine said as my video played. She knew what she was doing with that garden backdrop. "The contrast with his tantrum couldn't be clearer," Celia replied. "He's not wearing fancy suits anymore," Lorraine noted as they showed Travis dodging reporters. The segment ended with my quote, "Some inheritances grow, others rot." "She got the last word," Lorraine said. "She made sure his rotted. She never showed anger," Celia observed. "Just quietly changed everything. Real power doesn't need to shout." The screen showed the children's home, my garden bench surrounded by blooming flowers and laughing kids, the dogwood scattered petals like a blessing, my real inheritance growing strong and true. I wish I could have seen that bright spring morning when my old house transformed. Lorraine described it later with her characteristic precision. The staff worked overnight, decorating for the reopening. Dawn broke golden over the neighborhood, giving everything that magical April glow. My sitting room became an art studio, the kitchen got wheelchair-accessible counters, and my bedroom turned into a blue-walled library. The music room touched me deepest. They'd restored my old Steinway, the one Howard and I saved 5 years for in '72. Now it sparkled while a girl with leg braces played Fur Elise. "You should have heard her," Lorraine said. "Not perfect tempo, but such joy." The garden exceeded expectations. My beloved peonies bloomed pink, lavender lined the paths, and forget-me-nots dotted the landscape. Celia had planted those herself, understanding their silent message. Under Howard's dogwood tree, they'd placed my copper-painted wheelchair, surrounded by climbing roses. The morning sun made it glow like a throne. The plaque read, "In loving memory." She never walked away from what mattered. Children played freely, running, wheeling, moving at their own pace. None felt out of place. Sometimes the best revenge creates something better. At the ceremony, sunlight filtered through dogwood blossoms. News cameras rolled as Lorraine sat on my garden bench and read my final message. A mother's worth isn't measured by steps but by strength. The children fell silent, feeling the words' weight. A butterfly landed on the wheelchair, its wings catching the light. My house had become more than walls. It was a beginning. Where betrayal once lived, laughter now echoed, and my garden grew something far more precious than flowers. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart